Welcome back to another episode of the B2B Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Trainer. I am really excited today to have David Brier on the podcast. David is one of the world's top branding experts. His work has been featured in Adweek, Forbes, Fortune, Fast Company, New York Times Magazine, Inc., and numerous other publications. He's also helped build the brands of the New York City Ballet, Revlon, Estee Lauder, Legacy Chocolates, the New York Times Magazine, Sunbelt Software, KnowBefore.com, and many, many others. David is also the author of the bestseller, Brand Intervention, 33 Steps to Transform the Brand You Have into the Brand You Need, which he has called the Branding Bible. So why am I telling you all this, and why the long introduction? Because when David speaks about branding, you should listen. Branding is the key to scaling a business, regardless of whether you're a B2B or B2C, because at the end of the day, it's about talking to another human. David today walks us through his process for achieving differentiation, the brands that have successfully stood out and those who have failed, his perspective on growing beyond your network, and so much more. So get ready to transform your startup from the mundane into the awesome by tuning into this episode. Now, on to the show. Hey, welcome to the podcast, David. It's great to have you here.
Hey, man. I love the fact that you've got me here, and you've got great initials, BT, and I've got DB, and it's a whole it's a festival of letters, man.
It's a perfect combination. That's why you're on the program today. Now, it's definitely been a podcast that I've been looking forward to. I think I shared with you offline. One of my first books when I started transitioning back to the entrepreneurship was your book on the brand intervention, and it was, really an eye-opening book, and we'll get there. But I did want to throw that out. Highly recommend folks pick it up. If you need any questions after you're listening to this episode, Dave's got a ton of great content, which we'll cover. But before we get there, why don't you tell the audience just a little bit about what you're up to these days and who you're working with, and then we'll get into it.
Absolutely. I mean, literally working with companies that we're working with on, I don't know, I think 3 or 4 continents at this point currently. And, it's the thing that I love to do, which is really helping clients and companies just not blend in. I mean, the idea of predictable and the idea of incremental little, looks better, sounds better, da 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 da. It's like, yeah, but is it freaking amazing? I think at this point in time, anybody and their mother can put up a website, a landing page, a funnel sequence, this, that, the other, da 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 da. They could start a YouTube channel, a TikTok, and you go. And there's a lot of stuff that's not particularly great. It's just, it might be a little noisier. It might just be a little this, a little that. So you got to be bold. It's like, boring people or being predictably nice is like not going to get you down the marathon of the game of business.
Yeah. And it's not going to cut through the noise. That's for sure. And,
not at all.
I don't throw the term OG around very often, but, from a branding perspective, you've been around for, you can admit how long it's been, but more than 2 decades, let's put it that way, right?
two decades times 2, man. That's the math.
There you go.
I've been doing this for 40 freaking years, which is sick because 1, it doesn't feel like that. 2, I can guarantee you when I started my career, when I heard that someone had been in business for 40 years, I was sure that they were probably like, 1 foot in the grave, and I just do not feel dead, don't feel tired, and just I'm excited over what the hell can be done. And I run circles around 98% of my clients. I'm like, okay, boom, 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 here's what's got to be done. Da-da-dum, 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 da-da-dum. So, to me, it's all about, I mean, how into it are you? It's
right.
Like, let's go. To me, you're either a sleep aid or you're a freaking adrenaline rush. There's no in between. It's like, well, I'm kind of like in the middle. No, you're not. If you're in the middle, you're already half dead. That's That's the thing I would say.
I'm with you. I have been hesitant to say, I've almost been in this business almost 30 years. Now I might as well just say it has been 30 years. And you're right. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do for the second half of my career. Right. It's
I
one of
know
those
it.
things.
I know it. I mean, believe me, I look at that probably a couple times a week. I'm like, well, I probably have like 20 more years into this. Like, what do I want to do? Because now the one thing that I know is that now I can now do more, even though I am older, quote unquote, for those that are
Right.
just listening to this. I'm doing finger quotes, air quotes. Even though I'm older, I can, because of what I know, I can do stuff faster. I can achieve more in a given hour than I probably could in the beginning of my career than I might achieve in a week.
Yeah. I
Because
think
I just
that,
know, I know the landmines. I know the places I know when to zig and how fast to zig. It's not like I know it's not like I'm following a template, but I know it's like, okay, if I'm going to pivot, I'm going to normally pivot, 5 times faster than others who are like, they'll realize once they're near the finish line, oh, we should have pivoted back there. I'm like, yeah, no shit.
yeah, he who hesitates is lost, right? I mean, and it comes with
Absolutely.
experience. And to your point, it's right. I figured out a couple of years ago from a productivity standpoint. I got into a routine in the morning, and I forget who I was sharing with this recently, but I can get almost a full days of work done by 11 a.m. Right? Because that way, if I
Which is
block
killer.
it,
It's
right,
killer. That's
and
awesome.
and then if things go sideways the rest of the day, at least I had a productive day, right? Versus if
Yeah.
you don't do that and then things go sideways and you got nothing done. And so you're right, experience definitely does help in prioritizing. So with that being said, what I'd love to get is you gave us a little insight, your definition of branding, right? I mean, it's
Yep.
a term everybody throws around, and specifically branding as we think about the B2B world. And I believe it has been fundamentally changing. I think it's fundamentally changed now with the pandemic and moving everybody having to adopt to digital. But I'd love to get your definition of branding and how B2B founders and businesses should be thinking about it.
Completely. All right. So here's the basic. Let me give a context before I give the definition, because then it makes much more sense. Today, right? We are all, let's be real, we're one Google search away from 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 or more options, places to buy from, brands to choose. Okay. So we're one Google search away. So are you as a business going to win by out featuring? Oh, they've got 12 little features. Oh, we'll have 13. Oh, they have 13. We'll have 14. It's like, that's ridiculous. That's what I call, there's two races that I will never advocate. I won't advocate the race to the top, which is features, playing the feature competition. And I won't advocate the race to the bottom, which is, oh, they can do it for $10,000. We'll do it for $9,900. Oh, they can do it for $9,900. We'll do it for $9,750. It's like anybody can always outfeature you, and anybody can always underprice you. So where's your sweet spot? That's where it comes into the factor of branding and the definition. Because I was shocked when I had, I don't know, some 5, 6, 7 years ago, I decided to look on Amazon, type in branding and search under books. And at the time, there were 6,500 books. Okay.
Wow.
6,500 books on branding. Okay. Then now today, if you were to do it today, there's over 10,000 books today. And if you and I were to say, if you were to say, hey, David, why don't you and I start a book club? And you and me, we're going to read one branding book a day till we've read them all. You know that it would take us over 24.6 years to read all those books? So that's the thing with regard to that. And there's some good golden gems in those books, but you got to look for them. You got to hunt for them. And the authors, most of them are what I call rude. They basically invited you not to read a book, but to a treasure hunt. Yes, we've buried the 10 pages of goodness in here somewhere, and it's your job to find it, right? And I'm going, what? That's like me inviting someone over for dinner and saying, by the way, I'm going to put 12 things out for dinner, and only 2 of them are good. Hope you find them. It's like, what the hell is that? So anyway, so the basic definition that I came up with, because I looked at what was the thing that branding was achieving. Branding is achieving differentiation. So my forward definition is the art of differentiation. Because it's, I forget who said it, but basically the factor was like, there's this thing going around and I love it. It's that different is better than better. And the thing about that is why? Why would different be better than better? Because of this. Better means that we're incrementally we're still in the same bucket as all these other competitors. Do we really want to be playing on the same playing field as all these others? Especially if we've created, as a business owner, we created a better service or better product. Do we really want to be like, but you can compare us to all these others. Now, I understand that they may think that those are choices, but if you use differentiation to separate yourself from, now you're not playing, because the different is better than better. Why? Because if you're in the same bucket, you have to compare on the same terms. You have to use the same framework. You have to, then your value component can't be comparable. It only is going to be compared to all the others. And so maybe you have to go cheaper because you're still being compared in the same way. But different, that's why different is better than better. Because different, it's like, wait a second. It's like, why did Dyson as a vacuum cleaner come out and completely crush all these other? He used design. He came out with his turbine system. He used colors that nobody ever used. And the whole industry frantically went, ah! All of a sudden, they became yesterday's news. In one full swoop. They became the old way, he became the new way. And companies like him or Tesla or Apple or different companies that routinely innovate, that's the difference.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I think in the glory days of the tech companies, right, 4, 5, 6 years ago, you could differentiate on your technology, right, because it was better. But the way people can replicate and duplicate technology, what do you have? It's maybe a 3-month head start until somebody figures out how to mimic what you've done, and 100% agree on the pricing. The race to the bottom is you're not going to win it. And so it becomes that differentiation. And, my super simple definition is, what problem are you solving for the customer? How do you do it? How do you do it differently? And can you prove it? Seems super simple, but it's really hard for a lot of companies to come up with that. And, part of what I really like around your messaging is be able to take that back up to, the company level and say, who are we? What is our personality? Which is going to separate you. And going back, I grew up splitting time between the enterprise world and the startup world and roles between sales and marketing. So I got a glimpse of everything from a sales side. Branding is just foo-foo, unnecessary fluff and expense, and marketing and leads, and it's the whole thing. But I think we're now to the point, and I would love your perspective, that branding is kind of everything, man. If you don't get that right, it's going to be really hard or an uphill battle to try to win deals and separate yourself as you're trying to grow as a company. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, completely. I'm going to see if I can actually, you just reminded me of a quote from Gary Vaynerchuk. He goes, the difference between branding and sales is simple. Are you trying to convert, or are you trying to create an experience? The latter always wins, right? So he says the difference between branding and sales is simple. And he talks about the fact that the greatest brand, and I agree. I mean, I've seen this happen all the time, because I've created, I've helped companies accelerate their growth. I've helped some companies become like $1 million, multi-million dollar empires. I've even helped a few become billion-dollar empires. I mean, and it's always funny. I mean, I just was busting a client's chops, last night, because they said, "Oh, we're moving into this new phase." I'm like, "What? And when am I going to find this out?" I'm like, 2 or 3 years, and I'm like, I mean, I have a client down in Florida that went from a startup. Right, I'd worked with him in his previous company. He sold it. Went from in the tech space. Went from startup to billion with a B, $1 billion unicorn in 8 years. Okay, and he's an excellent CEO. He's an excellent leader, one of the nicest business people I've ever met, but is attentive to the right details. knew the role of branding and the importance of it, and we just gave it the right branding to really, and he says, you delivered perfect branding. We couldn't have done this without you, and that's the reward. But he didn't say, now granted, he flanks it and complements it with having right sales pieces in place, all this kind of stuff. You have those. But if you lack a brand, you're going transaction to transaction, and all your heavy lifting is on the shoulders of, do we have quote unquote rock star salespeople who can close, or rock star closers? And then all your brand is 100% reliant on, Mary, John, Billy, and whoever, because they can close, not because you have a great brand or great story, right? So that's the vulnerability. When you have a brand, you have a story that resonates. You have values that customers will tap into. Why do people choose me? They know what I stand for. They know that I'm in it for real, that I actually give a shit. And if you as a entrepreneur, because I work only with CEOs, if I'm working with you and you say something really damn stupid, I'm going to say, by the way, FYI, news alert, you're wrong, and here's why. And I'm not there to pacify, and I'm not there just to make stuff look prettier. It will look better because we've got the other things in place, but the better looking part, the better sounding part, those are outcomes of having the right branding fundamentals in place. Those are outcomes. Those aren't the drivers. It's like, oh, we want to look better. Let's call David. No, it's like, we want a brand. We want a brand that separates us out. But let's call David. And then the other stuff will come out. But that's the outcome. It's not the cause.
Yeah. No, and that's such a good point. And I love your analogy with the salespeople too. I mean, the way I talk to a lot of startup founders, like, well, I think I'm going to hire a couple salespeople. I'm like, yeah, you can, but I always say, sales is like hand-to-hand combat. You and I can do our good job. We can hit our quota and make numbers. You're never going to scale unless you're going to bring in 100 rock star salespeople. So you've got to start getting that story up front. And so if you think about it from a B2B founder perspective, I'm getting started, I'm actually talking to customers, I'm getting some success, right? I've sold a few, and I'm starting to think about the bigger picture. To me, without thinking about branding in general, content is right. Content is no longer an option, right? You got to have the good content, which then if you don't have the brand to tell the story, blah, blah, blah. So if long-winded question to you is, if I am a founder, we've got some success, how do I start thinking about building that brand in the early days? And is there some foundational steps I should be taking, even if I know it's going to pivot as I get a little stronger? But I guess, how do we avoid having to, all right, now we're at a $2 million company, I've got to go tell the brand story, versus, hey, as I'm starting to build this, is there a good foundational way to approach it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would start out, one of the earliest questions that I ask clients and business owners is, why you? Why should I, as a prospect, choose you? Why should I, as a prospect, choose your company, your service, your product? And here's the good news and the bad news. The good news, and frankly, they're interchangeable as far as I'm concerned. The bad news, the apparent bad news, is that you'll go, well, because we've been in business for so many years, because we're more knowledgeable, because we're more caring, because we did this, and because we that, and because feature 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it has never yet not occurred in 4 decades. All of those things that I just rattled off are little cliches that sound just like your competition. And because my normal next question will be, okay, and thank you for all that. Now, why do I know that if I went to any of your competitors, they pretty much would tell me their own version of essentially what you just told me? And that's at the point where they go, yeah, you're kind of right. I've never had anybody go, no, they won't tell us. That's like the moment where reality kind of slaps them in the face and goes, yo, dude, little too much Kool-Aid? And so the thing is so it's like, okay, now that you're drunk with your love affair with your own thing, it's like, now let's take the blinders off and go, okay, so now that we know that you sound like, you taste like, you smell like, and you feel like your competition, I'm going to ask you again, why you? Now we get that second run through normally takes 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour to sift through the stuff they've immersed themselves in and surrounded themselves in, all the greatness of their own blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, why you? Why your brand? Give me something that is distinctly different, that is valuable to me, that I care about. It may be sometimes the solutions that companies offer, they're not dramatically different. So you got to figure out a better way to frame it. You might have to just have a hell of a better story, right? And if you're offering something that's a little bit in the commodity, like, okay, we're really not offering something majorly different, but well then what can you do? Usually there's something they can do, or they can amplify, or they can go, you know what? We actually are simpler, but we've never really dialed into that, like how much simpler and easier we can be to the user. So in other words, there's normally a little blind spot. Because they're treating everything as though all the facts and all the features and all the benefits and all the everythings are all equal.
Right.
And that is insanity. They're not all equally important. They're not all equally relevant. There are certain things that are important. There are certain things that are unimportant. There are things that are good, they're triggers. There are things that are non-starters. If you don't have a clarity on those, that's like the shitty salesman, right? The shitty salesperson that just goes, oh, blah 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 blah, right? It's just like freaking diarrhea of the mouth. It's like they're gonna throw everything at you, hoping that something's gonna stick, and they'll tell you about this, and they'll tell you about that, and they'll tell you about this, and then there's this, and then there's these tires, and then there's this, and then there's that, blah 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 blah, blah, or whatever the hell it is. And you're like, what if you knew the 2 or 3 things that actually mattered to your customer?
Right.
Actually mattered, that none of your competition's talking about. Well, wouldn't that change things? That right there is an example of the kind of mentality you got to have.
Yeah, no, and that's awesome too. And I think if you get to a point, especially early on, if you can't find a single way you're different, you may not be in the right business, right? It's going to be a super hard slug
You may not.
To get there. And, what's your perspective now? Because I know, and I've been pushing, right, you can differentiate on experience right now. What's your overall experience with the customer brand? And I think simplicity is part of it, and friendliness. And is there a window right now to be able to differentiate on experience, or is that going to become a commodity? I don't think it is in the short term, just based on companies I work with. But
I think you're talking about user experience.
Yeah,
I would say user experience definitely is key. Absolutely is key. But I think there's 2 other parts that make that up. One is your sense of humanity. In other words, why is it that Apple is Apple and Samsung is Samsung? Their technologies in some places are quite comparable. But Samsung is this faceless entity we know nothing about. They do the cool photos, they do the stuff that's just as cool, just as beautifully shot and photographed. They probably spent as many millions of dollars on their ads as Apple has on creating its ads. But Apple has a soul, right? Now, if Apple did not have the, Steve Jobs, the legacy of Steve Jobs, I think that would be a very different discussion we'd be having. So you have Steve Jobs and the legacy of Steve Jobs that added truly a human voice. So that's one part. So there's the humanity, and then the other side is the values, right? The greatest brands in the world are built on a set of values. One of the greatest brands in the world, Nike. What's their slogan? Just do it.
Yeah.
It's a set of values right there, right? Under that banner of just do it, you can sell clothing, and you could sell sneakers, and you could sell equipment and whatever. because it's a set of values. And when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, right after he was ousted, and then he came back, I think it was 96, I think he came back,
Right.
and the whole thing was, what did he come back with? He came back with a campaign based on this one question. When you want to know someone really fast, ask them who their heroes are. And that blew me away.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
that became the Think Different campaign. Because if your listeners are unfamiliar with the Think Different campaign, they need to, as soon as they're done listening to this, they need to go to YouTube and find out, search on it, Think Different, find the black and white. It's about a 2-minute long video, if I remember right, about 2-minute long commercial, 1.5 to 2 minutes. And it's black and white. And it basically was, here's to the troublemakers. Here's to the rebels. Here's to the round pegs in square holes, or square pegs and round holes. And it's the script was amazing. But what was more amazing was this. It showed people, not in color, because that would have looked a little too polished, black and white.
Interesting.
Because, so it made it more authentic, more documentary-ish. So it was, one, you had that. Two, you had the component of none of these people ever used a computer. Forget ever using an Apple device. Never used a computer, because you're dealing with Einstein, Picasso, John Lennon, Bob Dylan, Alexander Graham Bell, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, etc., etc. You had all of these. And these were simply trailblazers. These were rebels who refused to conform. And that talked about values, right? They didn't talk about, hey, better operating system, cooler interface. That would have dumbed it down, right? So anyway, that's a lengthier answer, but it gives you a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, no, I like it. And I think it leads kind of my next question. So you think about it, it's, I don't know, maybe easier isn't the right word, from, business to consumer, right? How do I really one-on-one? But now when I try to translate into a business to business, it's still a business to consumer, but you may be reaching different people. And where I find a lot of brands or companies have a hard time, kind of conveying exactly what you just talked about. What are our values, and how do we make this more human, and how do I make the experience? And I know it's going to take a little while for companies to catch up, but I'd love your perspective on how the B2B can start to close that gap, or if you can think off the top of your head any companies that are doing it well.
I could rattle it off in my sleep. Gary Vaynerchuk. Hello, there's B2B, okay? B2B. But the bottom line is if you really understand human nature, it's really H to H. It's what I call human to human. Bottom line is there's a person with a pulse and a heartbeat at the end of every decision, whether you're in B2B or B2C. And frankly, B2B and B2C is a freaking myth. It's bullshit. I think that's a crock of bullshit. I think that was an interesting idea that someone pitched, but the distinction was useless. There's you and me making a decision. The only difference is, in a B2B space, I'm making a decision for a group and for the survival and the benefit of that group, which is known as a business. Personal, it's like, well, it might be for me. It might be for me and my wife, family, or my spouse, or my family. But so what's the difference? So it's like we have one context and another context. But the bottom line is, it's still, you go, okay. So to me, it's like Gary Vaynerchuk. The sharks on Shark Tank. I mean, come on. You take a look at Richard Branson. Virgin. He has B2B, B2C. He's all over the place. So the bottom line is are you real? Do you stand for something? Do you care about something? And what are you defiantly opposed against? Right? If you're a brand, you need to be a staunch advocate of something. Like, we love efficiency. We can't stand inefficiency. There's your love-hate. There's your hero, your villain. Bang.
Right. I love it. Yeah, I think anybody that's seen Hamilton, now that it's been on, Disney Plus, what will you, if you don't stand for something, what will you fall for? Right. I mean, it was one of the lines, but I think going back 200 years, it's still true, right? There's no hacking your way around the brand. And, I love the Gary Vaynerchuk. He's kind of redefined the way we think about certain things, and, brash, and he is who he is. He's unapologetic about it. And he said, if you like me, great. If not, no love lost, right? Curious about a bigger company like Microsoft, right? They've kind of, they lost the battle of the PC and the operating system, but yet they've kind of reinvented them. I haven't looked recently, but they're one of the top 3 valued companies in the world at the moment. And I do think they brought a little bit more personality into the business. Probably a long way to go, but just curious your thought on Microsoft.
Well, okay. So the thing is, I mean, Bill Gates was an awkward geek. All right. He was, not a big personality. And the difference, and actually, I haven't thought of this before, but this to me is the distinction. Apple was entrepreneurial. Microsoft was capitalistic.
Oh, yeah.
That's the difference. It was a transaction. Microsoft was like, we're gonna give away our operating system. We're gonna get it in every computer, right? It was like, if you're a fan of Star Trek: The Next Generation, they were like the Borg, right? They're going to assimilate you, right? so the thing is, Microsoft, they do some fine things, but like Samsung, it's like a big so what, because they do as many wrong things as they do right things. So they are the king of bloat, right? They just keep adding crap onto their stuff. They don't clean it and streamline it, and so it's like, to me, they're the king of bloat. So, and for example, they bought Skype. Did they do any? Why didn't they become the next Zoom? Because they weren't entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
They simply, they're in the merger and acquisition context. Why didn't they do that? Skype sucks. I hate Skype.
100%.
Right? Skype is just crap. So, so there's that. You go, okay. Then you go, all right, well, what about LinkedIn? Is LinkedIn a great user experience? Hell no. Do I use LinkedIn a lot? I certainly do. Do I like it? I don't like it at all. Its messaging sucks. It goes on forever. I have to it's like nightmarish. Doesn't help me. Does it help with regard to communities? Not really. Does it help with regard to making things easier? Does it have an algorithm which makes sense? It has as many flaws, and LinkedIn Live sucks. LinkedIn, if you're listening, Microsoft, your LinkedIn Live experience sucks. It sucks as a user, and it sucks as an actual, someone going to a thing. So why isn't LinkedIn in the right hands, which Microsoft still has the opportunity to do? Right. It's just but their culture. I don't know if their culture is going to be set up to ever take it to this point. Why couldn't LinkedIn become the TikTok of the business world in terms of popularity and adoption? Why not? So those are the kinds of questions that I ask. I go, what the hell's what's the deal here? Yeah. So that's the thing that I look at. I think that Microsoft, from a culture standpoint, the new CEO is definitely better, definitely more personable than Bill Gates. I mean, Bill Gates, he is the poster child of the awkward, socially awkward geek. Right. He's not, he is.
Yeah, 100%.
I remember there was that one. I remember there was that one with, what was the heavyset CEO, Steve Ballmer. So Ballmer, Ballmer, he always he was always dancing like it was like, dude, it doesn't look good on you, and it doesn't look good on all the rest of your guys either. I remember Steve. I remember Bill Gates in the background, kind of it was like that.
Right.
I'm like, this is so uncomfortable to watch, guys.
Be you, right?
It was so bad. And so anyway, so that's my feedback as far as those guys go.
Yeah, interesting. I think you're right. I mean, right now LinkedIn is just kind of sitting there. The best tool for the B2B world to connect, but your messaging, everybody leaves the messaging to convert. Hey, let's take this up in email. Why? They should be able to better interface 100%. So somebody's going to come along and figure out how to upset this apple cart.
Someone can dethrone someone. If Richard Branson or Mark Cuban wanted to dethrone them, that could happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
It could happen tomorrow, and they could, and just like Apple Music, their ascent was like meteoric, against Spotify, right? You go Spotify, so you got Spotify,
Oh yeah.
and but all of a sudden, bam, you had this amazing trajectory, and they had like what 50 million, subscribers, 60 million subscribers within, I don't know, 10 months or something like that, because they offered, it was in that ecosystem, and I love it. I mean, every week, every Friday, I get my new music based on my likes and stuff like that. And it's like, so I get convenience and I get discovery brought to my front door every week. Interface
Easy
is fine.
to use. Yep.
Boom, boom, boom. So, so it's just kind of like they did that. If Apple wanted to do that, Apple could crush LinkedIn tomorrow if it chose to.
Yeah. And I think that's why I think LinkedIn's a perfect poster child for legacy B2B, right? Just take it for granted. People will keep using us because there's no alternatives and do that. But guess what?
Because there's no alternative. That's where complacency and stagnancy are. The app will kill you. If you have a business, any complacency, there's not a single day that I don't take a quick scan of my business and going, is there anything that I'm doing that's lazy? Is there anything I'm doing that's not being proactive? Is there, it's like, I do it every freaking day. I mean, it's not even like, it's not even conscious. I just kind of like go, okay, good. Oh shit, there, right? Boom, fix, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's the kind of thing.
I think there's so much opportunity. And, though I moved into the back end of the B2B and the startup space particularly, is I think there's a huge opportunity to go take on these legacy companies that, one, because they're so siloed, right? Sales, marketing, customer success, or account management, and everybody's got their own operating budgets, and trying to pivot it back around to customer experience or the buyer and aligning with them is going to be so damn hard to do, just even from an efficiency standpoint, but not alone on the messaging. Which then leads me back to more of a tactical question for you is, I had one of those epiphany moments earlier during the podcast when I was interviewing founders of B2B companies that had made, what I would call above 10 million in revenue, right? And that's an arbitrary number, but, the research showed like less than 5% of all companies reach $1 million and less than 1% get to 10 million. And, I'm a big believer that's more execution than it is idea. But when I started interviewing these founders and talked to about those thresholds, to a person, they came back and said, where we got stuck was once I ran out of my network, right? So if I had somebody like you, which you have your own company, so bad example, but if I've been in the industry 25 years, start my own company, I can sell to my network. I can probably grow that business to $1 million. Now I've got to start reaching outside of people who know us, right? And to a person, they get stuck. Vast majority of the companies never figure it out, run out of money, they close. Or the other one's 9, 12, 15 months to figure out how do we reach that. So, one of the areas I've been playing around with, and I'd love you to shoot this down, is again, back to my super simple thing, right? There's people that know you and know they have a problem. That's your network, optimize it, sell. There's people that know they have a problem that don't know you, right? So that's more of an awareness problem. There's people that don't know have a problem, but they know you, more education, convincing they have a problem. Then there's the fourth, which is don't know they have a problem, don't know you, don't waste your money. I know that's oversimplified, but is that a fair way of looking at how do we expand our business and where we target? Or am I going too... And you won't hurt my feelings if you tell me I'm completely wrong.
No. I'm thinking through. I think that there's some legitimacy to it, but I mean, it's a combination of something that I observed myself and something that Seth Godin had said. He talked about someone was saying, "Oh God," someone was like gushing all over him to go, "Oh, Seth Godin, you're da." And he goes, "I don't think I've made that much of a dent." He goes, "Of a planet with 7 billion plus, so what? So there might be 1 million that know me or 2 million that know me or whatever." He goes, "So, there's a lot, because the person was asking him something based on the factor of penetration and awareness and this, that, the other. And he was like, it's not a matter of like everyone knowing you. It's about the right people knowing you." And that's his sort of his tribe sort of theory. But I guess like for me, I'll say like I've been doing this for a while, right? But it was around 6 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, that I was kind of like, I keep on hearing the same question, no matter who and what type of company, no matter what kind of industry, no matter where they are geographically, no matter how long they've been in business, how short they've been in business, whether they're a $50 million company or they're a startup, doesn't matter. And I was like, they all have the same questions. So it would be kind of stupid for me to not leverage this and go, you know what, I'm going to put something out there that is available 24/7, 365. It was called a book, right?
Okay.
Now, had I known this, I was talking to my wife about this. I was quite shocked. Had I known this, I mean, there was no one in college when I went to college that said, by the way, part of your career, you were just being trained for your specific discipline. There was no like, by the way, part of your career, if your goal is to influence many, you will want to have on your career path writing a book. And now that I know this, I'm kind of like, are you crazy? You didn't tell me that? Are you sick? It's kind of like someone like not telling you today, you may want to become comfortable with social media.
Right.
It's like, what? So, it's like one of those glaring, like, how dare you not mention that as an important point? Now, I observed people in my industry early on, and I had done some visual books because I started out more very design centric, more and grew into the whole branding part. But I did some things early on, and those were cool, and those were nice and fine, but it was very much geared toward the design industry. So when I started doing the book, I made a very conscious decision to scale myself and go, okay. And now all of a sudden, I have people in Australia and in the UK and in Europe and in Germany and in Russia and in Taiwan and here that are like, oh my God, your book, right? Because I wrote it for businesses and my whole goal was I wanted to produce something that was zero fluff, zero bullshit, not giving you extra words just because I wanted to pad the book.
Right.
No, I wanted to give you as much as I wanted to be as succinct and to the point as possible and give you why does this stuff work. If you want, I was like, if you want templates, go elsewhere. If you want swipe files, go elsewhere. Right? My whole thing was I wanted to write the book for business owners who didn't have time to read a book on branding. That was my whole goal.
And you succeeded, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. And so that was the thing. So to me, it was like, as far as scalability, that's one of the things that I look at. Is I look at a book is a powerful tool. Social media is kind of like a gateway drug to books, right? But I like probably many of your listeners, at the same time I've listened. Like I remember, and I'll leave this person's name out of it because I actually like this person's work a lot. But there was one person I'd seen a TED Talk, brilliant TED Talk, 18 minutes, right? I watched this and I was like, wow. I was riveted. I was stunned. I was like, this is a brilliant dissertation. Amazing. I'm like, if they achieve this in 18 minutes, oh my God, their book has got to be freaking mind-blowing. So I get to the book, and the book added nothing.
Oh, no kidding.
The 18 minutes was everything. The book added nothing to and I was very disappointed. I was like, really? Like, really? You had the opportunity to add and amplify, and instead you made the choice as the author of that material to not add any value to me as a reader. And now the person has since written other books, and they're smart, intelligent. I love this person's work, but wow, how disappointing. So so to me, that's one thing in what you've outlined. Yes, that's looking at it from the standpoint of the buyer's awareness. But I think in terms of scalability, if you can have something that can work 24/7,
yeah, 100%
on your behalf, no matter the time of day, night, time zone, or whatever, it's like now all of a sudden you have a little soldier that can be out there on your behalf all the time.
And when people can find you when they're looking for it, and now that you talked it's really education. It's hard to separate education and awareness, right? If you're doing it right and you're doing it 24/7, you're doing both at the same time, establishing it. So, all right, I'll rethink that process. But the overall goal is to reach people you don't know. And I think leveraging what you can do as an individual, as a business, makes perfect sense. And I think what is going to help some of these larger enterprises, right? Because there's two paths. One thing I ask, founders is, hey, is this a lifestyle business or a solopreneur that you can build and do really well? Or are you looking to build, technically air quotes, a real company? Which those lines are starting to blur, because you can add the same amount of value to companies with 3 people as you could used to be able with 300. Yeah. So why not take some of those practices or best practices and use it as your company as you would as an individual? So no, I love it. So, all right, David, I want to be super respectful of your time. Before I get to my final 2 questions, do you have any last piece of advice for, entrepreneurs as they're starting this journey?
Well, I mean, I'll just mention this just because I know that you'd mentioned it and I mentioned it, but the name of my book is Brand Intervention: 33 Steps to create the brand that you need, to transform the brand that you have into the brand that you need. And that's, if they haven't grabbed that, I certainly would invite people to grab a copy, because it is really becoming kind of like, happily for many, the go-to book, because it gives you the stuff real straight without any major preamble. And I intentionally avoided lingo when I wrote it. There's no marketing ease speak, right? There's none of that in there.
Yeah, and there's so much, and I said I still reference, I go back to it, I've got it on the Kindle, but you see 33 steps, you're like, oh my God, it's going to take me 6 years. But it's really not, right? But you talked about like the 4 words, the art of differentiation, the 66% rule, which sounds super complicated, but it's not. And we'll leave that as a tease so people can look it up. But no, I highly recommend it, because this is one of those books that you can go back and refer to when you have certain questions. And I don't think it's going to change in the next, obviously 12 months or 3 years, 5 years. I think fundamentally if the people that your listeners are dealing with, if they have a pulse and they have a heart, then nothing in this book is going to not be applicable. 100%.
And the other thing too, that I'll just mention this as an aside, because we're literally in the first week of it. I'm so excited about it. I actually created a brand intervention masterclass. It's a masterclass and mentorship hybrid. And it's an 8-week sprint. It is freaking so awesome. I had one of the students literally called me up almost in tears, saying, just from the first week, she goes, "You have changed my life." I mean, just from the first week was utterly like, I'm changing my whole business model. Da, 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 da. That's in the first week, man.
That's awesome.
And it builds and builds and builds. It is not like each week isn't just like, it's not like a piece of pie cut into 7 pieces. No, they compound and compound and compound. And so that's pretty exciting. So that's a nice compliment, because there are those that I'll help and that will hire me for this and that and the other to help them with their brands. And then there are those who grab the book, but then there are those who are like, hey, they really want this very personal, intimate, deep dive into just getting the tools. And I'm really, really, really pleased. I've been busting my butt. It's taken way more time to do it than I thought it would to create this thing, but it is really, really something I'm quite proud of.
That's awesome. And we'll link to it in the show notes as well. And is that something we can find on your website as well?
What I'll do is we've closed the registration on the first time. And so what I'll do is I'm going to speak with my partner and say, okay, for those that want to be on the waiting list, because it's not currently available, right? If you want to be on the waiting list. So we're going to add that little part.
Okay.
Which I think is that you've just lit a fire into my ass. That's good. I like it.
We'll notate it in there, because it's probably 3 or 4 weeks out from the recording. We'll give you a chance to get it set up. And you're so good that you took away one of my questions. I said, "What are you working on next?" And I didn't even have to ask you. So thank you for that. And last but not least, I ask every guest, And that is, what is one thing that you would highly recommend? And that could be professional, personal, what's something that's important to you, you think other people should know about or do?
I'll tell you what I spoke to someone yesterday, and they were like, they needed a voice. They needed an outside pair of ears and someone who could hear them. And so I heard this person, like, they have been successful in the past, and actually they hadn't. They said, well, I have my current business, and I need to ramp it up. I need to do this. I need to do that. Blah 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 blah. And I'm listening, and then I said, let me ask you something. Have you been successful in the past? He goes, yes, I have. I said, good. What I want you to do is I want you to lock yourself in a freaking bunker and not come out until you're done, and write down everything that you were doing, people you were connected to, initiatives that you were undertaking, and all this kind of stuff that you were doing at that point. He goes, yeah, but at that time, things were different than this and this and this. I said, listen to me. If any of your answers consist of things that are beyond your control, those are not true answers. Those are bullshit. What was the economy? Bullshit.
Right.
Because there were people during the economy, quote unquote, that weren't doing well. All right. So it's not the economy. Well, it might have been, I have certain contact. Well, good. I'm sure there are other people who knew that certain contact. It didn't mean anything for them. So any answers that have it as something out there beyond my control is not an answer to the question. So when I'm saying take inventory of stuff you were doing, take inventory of stuff that you were engaged in, initiatives that you were doing, things that you were very decidedly not doing, as well as things you were choosing to do. And that's your list of stuff that you did. That's stuff that you can own. That's stuff that you can do again. And so to me, the answer to your question is anything that comes back to each of us as a point of that we recognize I caused that, I'm accountable for that, I'm responsible for that, I can do that, I can initiate that, I can own that. That's something that is useful. Anything that is put someone else on a pedestal, put some other thing as the reason why it all went well, this, that, the other, those are not useful, those are not truthful, and those are smoke and mirrors, and those are red herrings. So that's my answer, is like, that's the thing that I would say. It's like the stuff that comes back to you from a standpoint of ownership is the stuff that's good. And that's good and bad. Right. It's like, well, something went really wrong. Good. What did you do to make it go wrong? Yeah, not from the standpopoint of blame, not from like, no, it's not that. It's simply, okay, what'd you do? Well, I didn't do blank and blank and blank and blank. Thank you. What should you have done? Blank, blank, blank. Good. No, you don't have to belabor any points. That's it.
Yeah.
Own it.
Such great advice, kind of the post-mortem, good or bad, of things. That we never do that personally. At least I don't. I mean, if things go wrong, you say, I don't want to do that again. But no, I think that's really good point. When things are going well, let's figure out why, and just don't say, hey, it was luck, right place, right time. Exactly. Create your own luck, create your own opportunities. So no, that unique answer, David. I love it. We haven't had that one before. And then again, I always look for the unique and good advice that we can follow. So lastly, if people are interested in learning more about you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Definitely, I would definitely say go and subscribe to risingabovethenoise.com, RISING, risingabovethenoise.com. Go there. There's over 300 articles, and these are like evergreen, meaning these are things that are really, they cover, here's a business, and here's what was done. Here was it before. Here was there after. Here's why I recommended doing what we did. And here was the outcome. And so it's really very conversational, very practical, great stuff. A lot of content, a lot of visual stimulus and eye candy, mind candy, etc. All kinds of good stuff. Certainly, you can reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, and YouTube is another. YouTube and Instagram, I do stuff quite regularly. More so on YouTube. There's 1 Minute Wednesdays. There's over 135 episodes of 1 Minute Wednesdays, so those are pretty cool. And so those are some places I would definitely say reach out.
Yeah, 100% recommend your content. Right, I don't want to say it's sensory overload on your website, but it's so good. And David's not just all talk; he walks the walk. And there's some really good examples. And I love 1 minute ones. I think I even commented early on when I first got to know you and your content. I said I love these 1 minute Wednesdays. So follow him on LinkedIn, connect on LinkedIn. We'll put links in the show notes to everything. And I really appreciate you spending some time with us on the show, David. It was my pleasure.
Totally my pleasure, Brett. And I would just say, I mean, to me, the biggest joy of all this stuff is helping people. It's like I tell people in the masterclass, I say, my job here is to give you back you. I'm just interested in stripping away the bullshit and just like, it's like, here you are. I'd like to reintroduce you to you. Here you go. Here's what you're capable of. And because I never buy that someone is an underachiever, is an underperformer, is this, is that. If they're making choices, it's like, good. Okay, you made that choice. Great. You made that bed, sleep in it.
Right.
And if you like the way it feels, great. If you don't like the way it feels, okay, you're the one who made it. You can unmake it. You can make it newly. But but that to me is just a matter of empowerment and a matter of independence. I like people being independent. I like people being in charge, and I don't like them being dependent and sort of, shucks. No. Right. Be a badass. Be a freaking force of nature, man. Cause some shit to happen in the world. Good stuff. I mean, we're each so capable of causing ripples in the world, and that's what gets me excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. And life's too short, man. That's the message is spot on. Some of us took a little bit longer to get there to find what our passion was, but as they say, better late than never, right?
Absolutely, man. Look, as long as you keep showing up, I cannot fault you for that, man.
Awesome. Again, thank you, David. Appreciate it. Stay safe, healthy, and we'll connect with you again, not too distant future.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much, Brett.
Take care.
Had a ball, man.
See ya.
Thanks.